Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the warm welcome and introduction. And I'm grateful to also have a couple from my Zoom online small group that we've been meeting for nearly 3 years. Floyd and Janine are here with my wife, Rochelle. So grateful to have them here supporting me. So grateful to be alive. So grateful to have this opportunity to share a bit of what God's done through my life. My life started in Taiwan, born to parents of Chinese descent. I actually have a little slideshow to help keep me on track. And I'm kind of a non-linear, random person. So this timeline will help you and me stay on track. And it's a little better than just watching me talk by myself. So I was born in 1966 in Taipei, Taiwan. Came to the U.S. when I was 8 years old. I'm the oldest of 3 boys, and my dad came to the U.S. before the rest of us, and you'll see on the upper left corner, that's my mom and my 2 younger brothers. So we came to the U.S. when I was 8, and my brothers were 6 and 1. But during my elementary, middle school, and high school years, we grew up on the East Coast around Washington, D.C. and Virginia. Traditional Chinese family, very practical, very much survivor mentality. We ran a small restaurant and then a motel business. And my grades were good. I was highly functioning, but my default emotion was just sadness. And that's why I included the picture with my parents there of my sad face. My dad was just happy to have a life and to have the means to live and to provide for our family, but there was something emotionally unwell with me. But because I was getting good grades, because we had food, we had clothing, we were healthy, then, well, what else do we need? Well, next slide will advance to a turning point in my life. So I went to school at Virginia Tech, which is maroon and orange, another reason I'm wearing orange. And during my first year, I was baptized, 1985. And my step of faith was realizing maybe there's more to life than just getting good grades, graduating from college, getting a job, getting married, having kids, rinse and repeat, and have that predictable narrative. And so my faith journey started believing that God had an abundant life for me, that God had meaning and purpose, but I really didn't know what that was. But the first step was to believe in Jesus and follow him. So that was 1985. The next slide shows my graduation from college. So I graduated from Virginia Tech with a computer engineering degree. Part of the reason I went to Virginia Tech was it was in state, so low tuition. But also, it was the first class that required all the engineers to have personal computers. And so during my high school years, I got really into computers and programming, and I just had a bent for math and science, and so I just kind of went that way. I got involved in a Chinese Bible study. That's the black and white photo. But my image of myself is that lonely person sitting in a big world, just not knowing what to do with my life. Next slide. And so the computer was not just my vocation, it also gave me an entree to connect with people. So one of the first persons that God brought powerfully into my life was a guy named Bugs Binion and his wife, Ann. And I met them through a computer bulletin board. So this is before the days of internet, and we would have computers that would have modems that would talk to each other, and we got into message boards, and we got to know each other, and he kind of became a spiritual father to me. And he showed me the love and kindness that my own father, though he provided for us and cared for us through practical means, Bugs and Ann provided me the hospitality and nurture that I also needed spiritually and emotionally. And so during the 2 years, he discipled me in the Lord, and he prayed me to seminary, and I took that leap of faith that maybe God could use me in his work in the kingdom. And so in 1991, I packed up all my worldly belongings and drove from Maryland to Texas and attended Dallas Theological Seminary. And for the next 4.5 years, I studied diligently and got a Master of Theology. I lived on campus, but I still didn't know what to do with my life. 1995 was when I graduated. I married my wife, Rochelle, and that was just over 28 years ago. And that's my family, my dad, my mom, and my 2 younger brothers. And we were the first couple that married in Asian American Baptist Church. And it was a festive occasion. I graduated from seminary on Saturday, got married on Sunday. Looked good on paper, but it was very, very stressful. I lost 15 pounds. I was stressed out the next 3 months just from seminary recovery, but God was kind and provided a ministry for me to do youth work in Raleigh, North Carolina, and that's where my son was born. Next slide. And so I pastored 2 years in Raleigh, North Carolina. My son, Jeremiah, was born there. And then I pastored 3 years in Northern Virginia, which brings me up to 2000. And during a job transition there, I was very lost. I was no longer pastoring. I didn't know what to do with my life. And I was, again, feeling very alone. Even though I was married, even though I had a son, and people were loving and caring around me, but my emotional and my personal well-being just fell apart. And it was during the year of 2000 I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So looking back, what I could discern is that I was a high-functioning person. I could work, I could get grades, I could hold a job, but inside I was just becoming more and more empty. You might call it burnout, you might call it identity crisis, whatever you call it, but I was just spent. And during the next year, I slowly recovered with medication, with talk therapy, and got back on my feet and began a journey of learning to rely on God for my career, though I didn't know what it looked like. And eventually, God showed himself strong. And so the next few slides, you'll see how God turned this story of emptiness and filled it with meaning and purpose. 2007, we moved from Washington, D.C. to Orange County. We took 3 weeks, made it a family vacation, downsized, and really had a most memorable time. From 2000 to 2007, I kind of worked in church consulting. I worked for a private family foundation, and I worked as a software developer. So kind of bivocational, trivocational, and that kind of has shaped most of my life, that I don't just do one thing, I do 2 or 3, maybe 5 things. Some of them pay, some of them don't pay, but God's kind of wired me that way to make life interesting. And we really enjoyed bonding as a family, so 2007 will always be a highlight in our life. But when I landed in Orange County, the stress of relocating took the bottom out of my emotional well-being again. So what I'm learning about myself, while my mind can run 1,000 miles a minute, my body takes time to catch up. And so part of learning how God makes us, we humbly submit to him and follow his leading on being a good steward. And so 2007, I had to, again, ask for help and make some lifestyle adjustments to become better. And one of the things I want you to hear in my story is that in whatever struggle you have physically, emotionally, mentally, financially, relationally, you're not alone. And it's okay to ask for help, which is very hard to do for us as Asian Americans, and there's always hope. Next slide. And so in 2013, a journalist in the OC Register noticed my website being very interesting. So I've been blogging since 2000. I've been on Twitter since 2007. And he noticed that I have a lot of ideas, and I do. But he kind of read between the lines and noticed that I mentioned bipolar disorder as one of the ideas I'm interested in blogging about. And he invited me to share my story for the very first time publicly. And after 13 years of managing my mental health, I felt supported and healthy enough to take that step of faith to share my story publicly. So for the first 13 years of living with bipolar, it was a private and quiet journey with a heavy load. But in 2013, by going public with that story, God began to show me that it was an open door and invitation to help others. By bringing it into the light, stories erase shame, and 2013 began a new chapter in my life, and OC Registered opened that door. And since that time, I've made a deal with God, I made a deal with God. Anytime I'm invited to share my story, I will say yes, and that's why I'm here. No. Next slide. 2017, another stressful event hit my life. It was after a month when I was suffering from insomnia, laryngitis, and bronchitis. And I was just frustrated in dealing with my physical health, that when my mood swings with bipolar, so those of you that may not know, bipolar, I have mood swings when I'm very high and I sleep less, I feel very energetic and feel like I'm Superman, usually 2 weeks at a time. And then 4 weeks of depression when I'm feeling, just looks like depression. Well, on February 1st, 2017, I went to Anaheim Packing House. I was very energetic. We were supposed to have a dinner meeting to celebrate something with my wife and son. I was ready to go into this private secret restaurant, and I thought I was doing Jedi mind tricks, and I was invisible, and apparently I was, because my wife and son couldn't find me, and they went off and had dinner somewhere else. I eventually did get into that secret restaurant, but apparently I was behaving strangely and dangerously, maybe, to myself, and so I wound up in the hospital for 3 days. And that was a very sobering time, because now I truly had to surrender my entire life, not knowing what God was going to do with it. And so it took about 9 months of recovery, and through that time, I've learned to humble myself completely and to realize, okay, my life is in God's hand. What will you do with it? And so after those 9 months, I launched a podcast called Erasing Shame, where we share stories of overcoming shame, because all of us have, whether it's called besetting sins or weaknesses or things that we are afraid to share because we don't know what others will think of us. But yet, when we bring things into the light, that's when God can show up and really transform those things into good for others. And so next slide. 2023, I'm going through fast. So as Pastor Dave mentioned, Christian Asian Mental Health just launched 6 months ago, and I'm partnering with churches around the country to advance mental health ministries in churches, because churches have a vital role to stop stigma and erase shame, which is more than half the battle when it comes to mental and emotional health. I'm so grateful to be a part of walking alongside of the garden and seeing how you've laid a great foundation about emotional health and going deeper so that you can experience more of the abundant life Jesus has for you in every aspect of your life. Because without your mental and emotional health, what else really makes a difference in your life? Your relationships and your physical, they all come to that. My son helped me launch the first series of podcast. We're encouraging Christian Asian mental health. There's a photo of my family, my son and Jeremiah, and Lord willing, Christian Asian Mental Health will empower and develop mental health ministries in 9,000 Asian American churches. And if God moves and provides more resources and people, there's 2 billion people in Asia that struggle with mental and emotional health. And then I saw a tweet the other day that mental health is the greatest mission field in the 21st century, so there's 8 billion people that can experience more of God's health and wellness. So thank you for listening to my testimony. Appreciate you giving me the time to share.